All right, traders. Hey, welcome on back for another fantastic edition of our Traders Talk Workshop. Monday, October 20th. Great to have all of us here just joining us. Tim, John, Brian, Kathleen, saw Barbara just earlier, Roseanne, Tom, Bob, Peter, Jim, got Claire from, I believe, Johannesburg joining us there. Great to have Claire and all of us here just joining us here this afternoon, maybe morning, maybe late evening, wherever you may be residing. Great to have all of us here. Not just North America, we're internationally known, of course. We got Claire in Johannesburg. I got Jonathan, I believe, in Honduras, if I'm not mistaken. Let me make sure I get all the good stuff out there correct. Yeah, Honduras. Roberto, normally Colombia. He might be traveling there a bit, actually, this week, just from Florida. But, Tim, Roberto, Margaret, Deborah, Brian, all of us here just joining us. Great to see you here, including a few of us just joining us from the Money Show event, right? And even just trial members still testing our room out from last week. Peter here is still joining us. Tung, you got Alexander, Alex, I should say. Great to have you here from one of our students, Brian, if I'm not mistaken. And also got Todd, non-emotional trader. Great to have you here, Todd. But otherwise, listen, there is a lot moving right now. But I had a question came in from earlier. I want to go over at least to begin, because it's something that I feel like a lot of traders look to kind of or a lot of traders kind of fall into, especially when you first join CTU. And if this is your first time with day trading, going in and out same day on a few different volatile stocks. So this was an email that got sent in just earlier, folks. And I did say, please, just any and all questions, email me, please. So I appreciate my student, John, just sending this in. And he just said quickly, hey, listen, there's 15 stocks on the watch list this morning. No idea how to get from 15 down to 1 or 2, which can be traded. I'm not seeing any value in the live trading room. Hindsight cannot be traded. All right, so let's cover that to begin. And you always hear me talk about hindsight, like, all right, well, hey, Captain Hindsight here. It's easy to say that, the market moved up this morning. Well, yeah, of course. There's a little sarcasm when I first say that, because I want you to know there's a little comedy behind it. But, how could we use the past? How could we use what's already happened to identify what could happen in the future? That's what we're doing. When I say hindsight, think of it like, going back on the chart and seeing what happened. For any of my football people out here, I know my New York Giants just had a horrible game yesterday, like one of the worst fourth quarter losses ever of all time. Well, they probably need to go back to the drawing board, and they need to review the tape, right, Jerry? If they don't review what happened on that Sunday, then how are they ever going to rectify those mistakes? How are they ever going to right the wrong? So you need to go back in hindsight. If you don't, it's foolish. All right. Now, when I say that, though, how do we apply hindsight towards a moving market, towards, a market that's live, market open, ding, 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 everything's moving. You got all the bright, colors, all the fast moving numbers. And listen, let's be truthful with ourselves here. 15 stocks on the morning watch list is not tiny. That is a lot to work with. That is a lot to digest. This is the entire morning watch list that I put out. So let's start with this. What I will tell students in class, in coaching one-on-one, try and start with a list of like 2 or 3 of these. 2 or 3. Now, if you were with us in pre-market before the morning meeting, then you know that NUAI is moving. You see us call it out there. You see us put REPL on the pre-market watch list early on. You know it's there. So you don't need to wait to have this list posted or for me to do the meeting at 9 a.m. to get a head start. So at least see, all right, what's moving here? What's trending well? If there's something that's just puking and tanking, it's dropping off bad. Well, let me ask Tim, Bill, Margaret, Sharon, all of us here. When a stock is dropping and tanking, who's winning that battle? Who's winning the battle when a stock is just tanking and puking and all that stuff? Sellers. So something I want to say quickly, we're going to, dip in and out here. But just to begin, which one was it early on? There was a couple of them. You, Amy. You, Amy, right? Just instantly, this was on our watch list at first. Well, we wait the first 5 minutes regardless, right? So we wait the first 5 minutes for any of these trades, including this. But instantly, it puked. It's like, all right, well, let's move on. Anytime something like that just happens after the market opens, you want to quickly move away. LAES, it was on our list with great reason. It would pop a little early in the morning. It was a great swing trade from the last several weeks. There's a chance for more. All right, listen, first 5 minutes came, this puked, move on to a different stock. Something like that is very quick and easy for me to share with you, and hopefully it's very easy for you to work with yourself. The first 5 minutes, we should look to wait to see the true direction of these moves. And hey, within that time or right at the 5 minute marker, if the stock is breaking support, just focus on a new stock from that list. Don't spend more time watching it if you can't try and follow it going up. Not to go off course here, folks, real briefly, we just answered this in phase 2. It's something I teach in phase 1. What time's reversal time? John, Debbie, Amy, Uday, all of us here, every one of us that's a student, let alone just a member here, if you're here pretty much every day, every week, I want you to answer. When is reversal time? Was going over this last week for all the people at the Money Show. You know, Intel last week ended up reversing right around 10:30 in the morning. What do you know? Well, all of us just here said the same thing. Funny enough, stocks like LAES, stocks like UAME, look what happened right around 10:30. Right there, right? Did UAME bounce then too? Right on the nose, right on 10:31. Ding. Just point being is that when a stock drops in the first 5 minutes here, if it was one of the 2, 3, 4 that you chose, time to find a new stock. That's it. And that's okay. That makes it easy. That actually makes it easy for us to eliminate things and allow us to have more room for others. Now, that's just one quick blur, but let's go into a couple of the trades from the morning watch list, including things that may not have moved up so nicely at first, but now they're breaking out. NUAI being one of them, the REPL perhaps being the next one coming on up. Beyond Meat, I think, is making a move right now. So these are stocks that were on our list earlier that, hey, they didn't make a great move. Maybe they didn't, tank right away at 9:30 for us to just move on from it. But maybe they didn't make that better pop like we were hoping for it to make. So let's say if you chose NUAI this morning for John, for my student that emailed me. Let's say you said, all right, NUAI is one of the ones I want to look at today. It's on the list. It's number 1. Let's focus on it. For a stock around this price, that's trading around this price here, folks, normally, what common set of price levels should we look to anticipate for there to be those big icebergs off of? Because remember, right at 9:30, when the market opens, well, we wait, but you should have some levels set up, at least for the stocks that you're interested in, prior to the opening bell. You saw the stock moving in pre-market. You saw me go over this at least at 9 a.m. So let's say you decide then and there, like, all right, listen, let's focus on NUAI today, huh? There we go. Uday, Sam, John, Tom, Margaret, perfect. 50-cent levels, dollars, right? So 550, which you could just loosely say this was generally holding below right before the opening bell hit. And then from there, obviously up top 6. All right, we're not going to plot every single 50-cent dollar level there, but 550, 6. Okay, now that's just an assumption. That's a generalization. That's an assumption here. I don't even have the NUAI up on my book map here. So I'm going to show you real time right now. This is loading right now for the first time here for me. So you'll get a raw reaction out of me here. Where really were those icebergs? Where were they? Well, let's focus on the orange and red lines that are out there the longest amount of time, because those are the ones that I respect the most. All right, well, I would say right here at 588, 587, that definitely is an orange line that's stretching out there for a good chunk of the page. That's a sell order for about 19,000 shares. It popped up as early as 6:30 in the morning out there all the way until the opening bell. So that's a price I definitely like, and something that actually should complement $6 as a key level. Normally, we look at 6 as a key resistance. Well, between 6 and 588 put together, the combination of those two prices, those are likely going to be put together as resistance. Now, I'll make things simple for us. I'm not going to plot a line at every price here, but just to mention, well, we have at least something at 588. There is something there at 6, a whole number. There was something at 5. There is a little something at 5, not much. I don't really see anything at 550. You see that there? I don't really see any orange line at 550. I don't really see giant spike of volume 550. Nothing sticking out more than the others. I don't see big green or red ball representing a level there. So you know what? I would say $5 seems like a decent level. 588 and 6, that's the real big level to work with there. I don't really see much in between here, and that's okay. That's all right for now. I'm just pointing out that there's nothing that I'm overtly confident in between. Now, when the market opens, well, hey, we want to wait the first 3 to 5 minutes just to see the true direction of these stocks. We know what's happening right now in front of us there, so let me get to that in just a bit. But I do want to address what happened after the first 5 minutes on this trade, because it's not like the trade to write mom and dad home about. It's not the trade that's the biggest and best right here. I mean, there was another stock on our list that ripped and took off right at the open. And, well, we covered that in our live class in the Phase 2 stock course earlier, the GSET trade. But you know what? Trading isn't always perfect, and we're not always going to catch the perfect runner every day. It was on our list, that stock, GSIT. But what if you weren't looking at that trade? What if it wasn't one of the 2 or 3 that you took the time to follow there, right? What if you chose NUAI? Well, do you just drop everything you're doing on that stock and just turn over to a trade that you're unprepared for? Not really. That's not always the case. Typically, that's not the right idea. So I will point out that after the first 5 minutes on this trade, well, it ended up making a nice little pop. It hit resistance later on here. But what I want to say is that although 550 wasn't a great level at first, as far as seeing it as resistance, well, it actually did flip into a small support. It tried, right? It popped above it here. It came back down, and it held support loosely off of 550 and really from this little chart resistance. So from that point at 935, there's a chance for this to hold and then go. But remember, it's all about continuation, and it's all about seeing higher highs, which this tried to make, granted. But from there, it's got to keep with higher lows. And the more this fails to make higher highs, it's going to eventually retest support and then break. So this started off okay. There was a chance for this to turn out to be the runner that it's currently, being right now. The stock is currently at the highs right now, but this is where, again, some setups may look to start off good, but if it's not going to make that continuated move that we're looking for it to make at that time, because, hey, right now at 9:40 in the morning, 9:41 in the morning here, well, that's prime time, or at least we should expect it to be such. So if it's not going to continue to move up, then something's broken with this trade. Something's wrong. And that's where it just became a waste of time after. It came back down pretty nastily. And at that point, you want to do away with it. The more that you get stuck watching this go nowhere, well, then that's where other trades are moving without you. GSIT, or maybe even afterwards Tesla we had called out, which was on our list, or some of the stocks that bounced while we were in class. I mean, those stocks will look to start to make a move at some point. But the more you get stuck watching this do nothing here, A, there's opportunity that's moving that you're not a part of. But then B, you're taking trades on stocks that have much less momentum than what we thought they'd be having at this point. It's going to set you up for failure. So this trade looked good at first, but obviously it washed out. It came back down pretty unexpectedly. You have to kind of move on from it at that point. Now, here, if you move on from it at this point at 9:42 in the morning, ideally, I would want to try and focus in on another stock from the 2 or 3 that I was more prepared to follow myself. But if those trades aren't moving up at that point, if they're not continuing to make higher highs or at least hold near the highs, then you're probably going to want to focus on what we're calling out in our trading room then. Because at least myself and Rich, we are trying to focus on the stocks that are holding the best at that very point. So if there are trades that you're focused on that are moving, great, stick with them. Because If you're already familiar with where those levels are, then you should feel a little bit easier with reacting to them. You don't necessarily need to jump to the one I'm calling out next. But if the stocks that you're looking at aren't moving at all, if they're dropping, if they're pulling back nastily like this was, then I'd say, hey, let's see what we're calling out in the room. Let's focus on the levels for that trade there. Now, otherwise, we could use the levels that we took the time to plot here to try and anticipate price action at least coming up, because the NUAI, it ended up eventually coming back up as we finished up our phase 2 stock course class here. So maybe we could take a look back on Bookmap at least just before and see what happened on this trade. There's going to be new orders that pop up, some orders that might disappear from earlier. All right. So if I'm going to look for a move on a stock, ideally it's going to be either A, seeing the stock retest resistance, or otherwise to see the flippening of that resistance into a support. So let me ask all of us here, Margaret, Tom, John, Sam, Uday, Debbie, all of us here, where do we see resistance? Let me zoom in. There we go. Where do we see resistance here on this heat map? For the NUAI, at least a little afterwards, when we came off the phase 2 class just before, or came from it, where do we have resistance showing on this heat map here? $550, right? Now, this is easy to say because, well, you could say it's hindsight. But if you were watching this in the moment, you know that this is going to represent resistance given that it's a darker red line. It's below where the stock is trading. So that's a sell order. That's resistance. Now, the stock wasn't really moving great at the time. So even if you weren't looking at it live right here and then, and let's say if you came back up to it a little after we finished up the class, well, this is where you see resistance beginning to get hit. The 150,000 share sell order at 550. And this is a much larger iceberg. So, I know that we were saying there wasn't really much at 550 here in the morning. Well, there's definitely something here now. And because of that, earns our trust. We definitely believe that 550 is going to be a strong level. The question is there enough buying pressure to break through this sell order and for this stock to not only break through it, but to see it flip it into a support? So this ended up doing a pretty good job where the first time it hit resistance, well, it was the pop and drop. Didn't run it right away. It didn't, break the level and fly instantly. This is exactly where I say, wait to see the first test of resistance. And if the stock can keep repetitively testing that resistance in a smaller time frame, that's ideally what you're looking for. And actually, I made a comment that was identical to that about a different trade earlier, just didn't make that move. But, there was a stock, LAES, I made that same comment on. This was just in the chat during pre-market. And this is just what we teach in our classes. This is the brunt of our strategy in a nutshell. This is like our elevator pitch of a strategy. The more that LAES retests resistance in a smaller time frame, it will likely break out. Now, that was for a different stock, and it didn't retest resistance again, and because of that, it didn't break out. Well, here, the more that this keeps knocking on this resistance in a smaller time frame, that's ideally what I'm looking for to take an entry. So, obviously, if you were watching this stock right here coming off of our class, this would have been the absolute sweet spot to take your first trade from at this point. Now, as we turn back to this trade as it keeps moving up, well, we did say our next resistance was at 6, at that 588 price, the combination of them put together, right? And actually, 588, I think that's where the iceberg was at the time. Now I would definitely just say it's 6. There was at least something there in pre-market at 588. So because of that, I would list that as a resistance. But that order ended up getting pulled and more resistance showed up at 6. So where we just assume for that 6 to be a resistance anyway, well, it definitely is such now and even a lot larger than that 588. So it hit resistance at first and then backed off. The next time it moved up to that resistance after the market open at 9:38, 9:39 a.m., the next time it did that was here at 12 o'clock noon. So I will tell you, that's a lot of time in between level tests. That's not necessarily retesting a resistance in a smaller time frame, like I said about that other stock, but in a smaller time frame. So the amount of times, or I'm sorry, the amount of time that's gone by from the initial test here to this one, way too long. I would not be bullish immediately here. Now it does start to pop, so that's where you could begin to think, hey, if this is going to begin to pop from resistance and start to move off of it, perhaps we could see this flip resistance into support. Perhaps. I know there's been a shake or two in between that's happened since, but I'll tell you, at least as of right now, this stock is still trying to flip resistance into support. I would rather it not break below this 588 line going forward. And also, if anything, you do have a nice sized iceberg on the buy side live right now, about 58,000 shares. So that could complement this area to see it flip into a support. It was a resistance earlier. And if we're going to expect to see more out of this trade later on today, well, we got to see resistance flip into support sooner than later. I mean, preferably now. So there's actually a real shot for this to try and make another move. It's all hinging on this area. You know, if this 58,600 share order gets broken through here, odds are this is going to crash pretty bad. Maybe it gets filled, maybe it gets nipped and then it makes the slingshot. But if this quickly breaks below this buy order here, if support quickly gets broken through and it drops off a good extent, consider this thing done. It's only up 29% today, which isn't even a lot for one given day. But this stock has been on a tear since like the end of September. So, you know, eventually every tree falls down, right? Every roller coaster has a top. And if we look long term, I don't know if this has a great long term graph to use and try to rely on for strong daily chart levels. You really don't. You have the closing price back from the end. The end of year price right there. So $6. You know, maybe that could be a resistance there to complement it, of course, like we just said. But otherwise, though, if this wants to move up later on today for us, then let's just have it hold pretty cleanly from this 585. If it breaks below there, then I'm led to believe this thing is going to tank. All right, so that's a little bit of a mix of answering that question to a small level, but also trying to follow this live here currently. But the key is this. You don't always just want to jump over to the stock that we're talking about in the room, because that doesn't mean that's the only stock moving. There could be plenty of other stocks from our list actively moving at the same time. So let's say even for something like REPL, this didn't have the greatest market open. You know, it popped at first and then it dropped. And then later on, it found its legs, it's found its footing there, and it made a much better move. So perhaps you started off on a trade like this and you said, all right, there's a shot for this to try and break higher. And we could see if there's going to be a new entry on this. Clearly, it didn't work out. Like, it wasn't the runner to work with. But I understood if you ended up starting your morning off looking at REPL. It was number 2 on our watch list, and it was showing great signs here, building up pretty well. After the first 5 minutes, it even popped. So there could have been a thought for this to try and flip a resistance into a support. So let's say if you tried to follow this trade here and look to take an entry on it. Well, something like this, I would normally look to focus just on my dollar levels with 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. There definitely is some buying that kicked in here. This seems to be about 114,000 share sell order here, right at $8. Now, early in the morning, this thing got blasted through. This ended up getting filled. It got hit. Big volume spike here on the right, on the below the chart here, where my cursor is. And then you could just see on the far right side, a larger spike of volume, a lot more green than red. So it goes to show that order ended up getting filled. Now, that was early in the morning. So the more it kept getting poked and poked in a smaller concentration, that's where you should be expecting that move up. So that was a pre-market move. Went from 8 up to 9 and then up even a little higher from there before the opening bell hit. If you were focused on this trade leading into the open, I'm mainly just focused on a couple prices here. The $8 resistance that broke early, but then also $9, because $9 you could see kept getting hit across the morning, and even more volume built off of that price later on. So this even more stands out at this stage. I would just look at 8 and 9 as key levels going into the morning for this stock. Between that and then later on $10. The opening print here too, you could use. Like if you're just using the opening print, of course, wait the first 5 minutes before jumping in. But still, this was already moving up right at the 5-minute mark. There's no entry here for me using the opening print until it comes down. And then at that point, you're trying to catch a falling knife. So it's not really the best game plan at that stage. It's pretty similar to like, the UAME stock that ended up dropping back down pretty quickly. You don't really want to catch that type of falling knife. The NUAI, eventually when it came back down, the same thing happened. You don't want to really catch that. So for REPL, when this comes back down after, if it could hold over 9, great, but otherwise, it just is stuck. This thing isn't really showing too much anywhere here. It's building support. And then eventually it ends up breaking back above that $9 level and $9.12, which was the opening print. So again, the better move was unfortunately a little bit later on here, just after 10:30, heading into 11 o'clock. Because at least from 9:30 to 10:30, if the stock isn't trending up at that point, making higher lows, higher highs, then I'm not really too interested. And then even afterwards, it's not even to say at 10:30, it's guaranteed to bounce back up and quote unquote reverse. Technically, I guess it's easy to say that it did here on this one candle. But here on this trade, 9 and 9.12, just with that being the opening print, and $9 being a pretty big pre-market level that you had your eyes on early, it took a little while for this to make the better move, at least this specific stock. So once it ended up breaking back above resistance here, thankfully it flipped it into support, ended up making a much better run at that point, right? Brian says those shakes were rough to stay in, though. For which one, the REPL or for which one, Brian? Which one were you talking about? REPL? What were you looking at, pre-market, Brian, or were you looking for like the mid to late morning? 5 minutes in? Well, the first 5 minutes you shouldn't be in. Right? At that point, you shouldn't really be jumping into trades in the first 5 minutes, and at least using the cyber clock that we teach in class, you should be getting out of your trades by 9:10, 9:15 in the morning. Let the stock have a chance to breathe and relax before the opening bell, and let yourself have a chance to breathe and relax before the opening bell. That's all. After the first 5 minutes, you mean? Yeah, but still, even as such, we were saying there wasn't really as much of an entry here in this move because it was already popping off of 9 and 9.12 from the first 5 minutes. So if this was going to make a move for us to take, it would have been likely off of 10 here to see it retest and break over 10, maybe flip that into support next. But after it came back down, there really wasn't much of a move at all. If you were looking at 9, that's your only thought, but there was no level really in between 9 / the opening print and $10. If there's no level, there's no Josh. If there's no level, there should be no Brian. There should be no Leda, Allen, etc. If there's no level for you to take the trade from, no entry. Now, that could take me over to a trade like Beyond Meat. Briefly, I just want to zip through this one trade because it's moving right now. Also, a stock from our list. I'm in this live right now. And with this, it ended up finally making the move that I was calling out for you from the morning. So with this also on our list, this could have been a stock that John or any of our students could have prioritized. And I understood why, because, well, A, it's on our list. So if it's on our list, that's where you should begin. But otherwise, it's a cheap stock. It was, moving up earlier in pre-market. There's a thought for it to move up more after, as you could see. Now, for a cheaper stock like this, I'm immediately just focused on $1.50 prices here. So just obviously at $1, that was where we had our focus. Going into the opening bell, the opening print, I think, was at 101. So I'll basically just say at $1.01. That's just the level now. There's 4.8 million shares that got filled right at the market open at that price. So, where we call this a big iceberg level, this is at $1.20. This actually is a pretty big level, just over 1 million shares here. 1.1 million shares looking to be sold at 120. Well, hey, if that's big, if we're calling that a big level, then remember, how much more respect are we giving this? 4.8 million. So when the market opened up right at 9:30, unfortunately, or right at the 5-minute marker, it broke down, it dropped. So I had no interest in this trade at that point. We're waiting the first 5 minutes, and if this is just going to drop right away, let's move on. I'm focused on something else then. That's all right. Now, when a stock breaks below big support, folks, and it tanks, what are we expecting that support to flip into? Margaret, Debbie here. Resistance, Sam, resistance, Phil. Absolutely. So to see this move back up, I'm expecting resistance at $1, at $1.01, obviously, like we said. Well, hey, just answer this for me here, folks. Just the opposite to what you just wrote me now. When a stock breaks over resistance and then it runs from that resistance, what are we looking to see that resistance flip over into? This was at 11:45 in the morning. I wrote this right after we finished up the class, and if I'm writing this, I'm interested in it. So, it broke over one earlier and ran. Now let's see if we can get the support to hold. That's it. So I'm in on this trade right now from exactly that 101, but it's been doing great since. Now we're going back to that resistance, though, at 120. Live right now, this is currently where we stand. We're moving up to that 120 level for the first time today. For the first time since this order showed up. It was maybe there earlier. I know there's a lot of social media chatter and talk, people on Twitter with their Twitter fingers talking about Beyond Meat. It's going to go up to $5. I don't think so. If it does, it would be because of a short squeeze. This is one of the worst performing stocks that I've ever seen, IPO. This is a horrid company. Now, there is a gap for this to try and fill. So if there wants to be a nicer short squeeze here, we could potentially see this fill the gap up towards 197, $2. But if this is testing resistance for the very first time today at that price, testing that iceberg for the very first time here, wouldn't be such a bad idea just to take a little money off the table here, folks. So I'm going to pull my stop right now. I'm going to close half this trade out just here. And you know what? I'm going to use a stop market order for the rest of this. I don't really use stop markets as much, but oh, whoops, pardon me. I got to do that on the other half of that trade, not just that. There we go. There we go. All right. So I took half my trade out here just live right now. I'm sorry, a quarter of my trade out right here. Pardon me. Right at 119. I still have 3/4 left, but you can never go broke taking some profit. It's at a major resistance, testing it for the first time today. So why not take a little off the table? Now, if this wants to get crazy, and if traders see a short squeeze in this stock, and if they want to have this pump up more, that's why I'm keeping 3/4 remaining, because I'm hoping that we could see this blast over this 120 resistance over time. Well, and just like Mike, Phil, Jeff, Sam, Debbie, Margaret, Uday, Catherine, all of us wrote to me just before, see resistance flip into support then, right? So that's basically the game plan live currently on the Beyond Meat trade. Real briefly, I have to get through some email questions and questions that came in from the chat just before, but I want to get to email first. I made it a firm point this morning, folks. I was juggling a few bowling pins in the air this morning, and if you wanted to help me out, it would be nice to send me over a quick email. So I was asking earlier just to do that. So I saw from Uday, Erica, Nabil, John, all of us that wrote me just before. I appreciate you. And we'll get to the chat just at the end. So Eric, I did go through your question in the class, actually. So that's great, actually. That was super timely. So, Erica, your email, I did answer it, and I saw you in the class with me in the phase 2 stock course. I just taught a whole class on halts. So, for anyone that has questions on halts, I just suggest for you to go back on the recording now. Phase 2, lesson 3, we did that this morning, October. But otherwise, though, let me know if you have any follow-ups on that, though, Erica, with the halts. From Uday, just had a question about REPL earlier. So that was the one that had the shaky move. It didn't really have a great level between 9 and 10, though. Between the opening print and $10, just that 9, 11-ish area, and then up top at 10. So Uday said he heard me warning about REPL around 9:50 in the morning, trading at that opening print to be aware of when it was trading at 9:25. When you had warned us the first time. Uday was asking kind of how did I determine 9:12? The opening print. It was the opening print right there. And again, that's something I go over in phase 2 a little bit more with. Not even with halts. That's just something in time and sales I cover, interpreting volume live. I did that in September, just last month. So this was the opening print. It was 290,759 shares, and that's at 9:12. So that price is a new level on the stock for the day because of the print that showed up. There's a reason why there's 290,000 plus shares that got filled at that price. So I'm using that as a level. Now, why I'm warning about it, why I was warning about it today, was because, well, at face value, what do we nickname the red as? Initially, at face value, what do we nickname the red as? At first, we name it selling. Yeah. So if this thing keeps kind of coming into support and it keeps poke, then I'm thinking that it's going to crash and burn. So that was at what, 9:50 in the morning or so, or maybe like a little after or before. So it's coming down. So that's where I was just saying it's already flirted with this price. If it wants to run better, I just feel like it needs to stay over it. And if it's going to break under it over and over and over and over, well, that red we're at least initially calling selling. The more times that we keep seeing a stock nip and test support over, the sellers, in my opinion, are winning that battle through and through. Now, at this point, that's where I'm just likely moving on to other trades. When this breaks below here, it's like, this thing's over. This thing's done. So I don't want to have anything to do with the stock after that point because I'm expecting lower lows. Now, if the stock wants to fight and work its way back up and even try and move up higher, well, it's going to take its time. It's not going to be quickly. It's going to have to prove itself to you, right? So what does that mean, prove itself? Well, eventually see higher lows begin to rebuild. But then more importantly, it needs to flip that level back into support. So, if you were asking me at 9:57 in the morning, would I have guaranteed expected this move here? Nothing's guaranteed. If you think I guarantee anything in this game, you're silly. That's just where I'll say, though, yes, I wouldn't have thought it would make a really nice move if you were asking me at 9:57 in the morning, 9:55 in the morning. I'd say, hey, if the more this keeps testing that area, it should just crash and burn. Now, if we come off of class at 11:30 in the morning, and this is even already above that price and inching up, well, that's where I'm going to have to respect this trade more and say, all right, well, where is my resistance? Where am I going to look to try and see the next resistance flip into the next support? $10, right? $10 could very well be that opportunity, but maybe for later on today, the more this keeps poking up towards 10, perhaps we'll see history repeat. Maybe there's a new iceberg order actually showing up that could become that level. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, not really. So 950 became a level, though. So maybe, like we'd said before, 950 wasn't a great level at first, but after 10 o'clock in the morning, something showed up. Poke, breakout. It moved up. All right, well, you know what? Because this order showed up here and because it got broken through, buyers stepped in and broke through that. Well, perhaps now we could try and treat 950 a little bit more as a level. It's possible now, after we saw that resistance get broken over, if this wants to move up later on today, perhaps we could see 950 flip into support from here. That's possible. But that's where I kind of say, like, if you moved on from the stock as it was coming back down here, you thought it was going to just brutally tank. Hey, that's what I would think too. I would expect that. So if it wants to prove itself, let it. I'm never going to risk my money on a trade that I feel is unproven. Don't get me wrong. It's not like I'm, a 100% win-loss trader. I'm always going to be there, right place, wrong time on occasion, or I might just have a bad trade. We're human beings. But you better believe my mindset will say, I'm going to try and gather up as much evidence as I can. So if I'm not as convinced that the stock is going to move as it breaks below this level again, then it's not going to surprise me if I come back to the trade later on and it's already starting to prove itself because, hey, I'm not going to watch the stock here as it's down and dropping. And the more I'm watching this just meddle around and maybe potentially, hopefully go back up, the more I'm spending time doing that, there's other trades moving without me. That's not good. So if this stock comes back up here and you catch it right at this moment, nice. Right place, right time, fell into your lap. But the more this is moving up and you're kind of catching it after the fact, we have to then ask, all right, well, where was the resistance level afterwards that broke? Was there one? Because again, not to sound like a broken record player, 950 wasn't really as big of a resistance as 9 was, as 8 was. I'm not giving 950 as much respect compared to those prices at first, but maybe I could here coming up. Maybe, after seeing this order getting broken through and the stock ran up after, all right, well, resistance could flip into support. So now at this point, I'm more just focused on 950 and I'm just now more focused on 10. If this pops from here, great, because I'll focus on 10. If this drops from here, great, because I'll focus on 950. I'm not going to jump in this trade in between levels, though. Yeah, Uday, exactly. There you go. So Uday just answered his own question. They're just kind of asking about the lack of levels at first. At first, yes. All right, let's keep going through emails, though, because I want to make sure that we get through everyone that had sent in an email. Uday, I appreciate you right there. Erica as well. I got to her email from class. Again, let me know if you have any follow-ups on that. Nabil had asked this earlier. Hi, Josh. Please, would you explain to me the gap fill? You always mention gaps on a daily chart, up or down. How do you trade them? Do you take caution at the gap fill or no trade? Thanks a lot. No problem at all. Absolutely. And here, I will just mention I'm in teacher mode still. So we have a whole class on gaps, squeezes, bounces. That will be technically live next month, November. We just did that back in August classes, though. August phase 2, lesson 7. Also lesson 5. Lesson 5, historical charting. I allude to it there because, well, with a lot of gaps, they're seen evidently on the daily chart, right? So this is a freaky one to use because there's like a ton of gaps. I don't really like that as much. But this is where I can go over the SMCI trade that we nailed just a couple weeks ago. I got out of that trade just because it filled the gap. So notice here on this one candle, August 5th, after the market closed at 4 p.m., SMCI had to have tanked. It dropped down from this closing price here all the way down to where it had opened up the following morning. So point being is that this ended up building back up here. And then once it started to break a little higher, it went to fill this empty space here. From the close price of this candle to, this wick. So that's where we were focused around for this swing trade. I got in on this from 46. I was shaking around a little bit at first, but we ended up holding higher lows. It ended up breaking back up here and it filled the gap, right? And then some. It filled the gap and then more, but from where it gapped down from here, that created a gap. So that's something that I do, tend to look at, and I put a big focal point in that with my swing trading. Beyond Meat gap down here from the 10th to this morning. So technically, this is trying to fill more of a gap here in accordance to the daily chart. All right, so I mean, that was a quick one right there. Let's see, just make sure that we got through all emails first. I appreciate you folks. Thank you so much for just doing that for me. Yeah, there we go. All good. All right, so I want to go over NVIDIA swing trade. Then there was a couple of chats I want to just get to. I think someone, one of our students, Todd, asking about AMPX, or maybe it was DVLT. But I want to go over the NVIDIA trade. Did anyone jump in on NVIDIA as a swing trade earlier this morning? Anyone jump in on NVIDIA as a swing earlier today? Lee, you did? I only asked to ask. If I ask, that does not mean just do it right now. If I'm asking, that means maybe you should have from earlier. But otherwise, maybe, hey, there's other trades out there to bring in, other fishies out there in the sea to bring in, folks. It's all right. I just asked to ask because we had called it out before. Now, the question is, though, is this going to begin to make a higher high? That's what we're waiting on here. And quite frankly, the market's holding well enough, but if we see a small little dip, lower high, pulling back, then I'm sure NVIDIA is going to go with. But the reason I brought this to your attention earlier before we started our class was because, well, we were looking at NVIDIA from the beginning of last week. I think it was like Monday, Tuesday last week before I went to Orlando. This was holding pretty nicely here at 184 or so as resistance. The more it keeps getting poked in a smaller period of time, I would be thinking that it's going to, A, break over resistance and run, B, flip resistance into support. So at least earlier, I was hopeful to try and see NVIDIA flip that 184 into a support level. It's not holding exactly that price right now as far as, support currently. What it's doing here, I'll show you. Let me ask everyone here briefly, where do you see the biggest volume spike on my chart right here? On my chart, where do you see the biggest spike of volume? Where do we see the largest volume bar? Uday says 1013. Margaret says 1013. And I think they mean before that number, right? To the left of that, right? To the left, right? So technically that's from the 10th. It technically is from Friday, October 10th. This was Friday, then the 13th, I guess, was a Monday. So, for anyone that wrote the 12th, you give you partial credit there, right? Debbie and Catherine. But everyone's saying it's the volume spike before October 13th. Now, this was the closing bell print. This was the closing price from that day. And it's actually the closing price from that given weekly candle too. So I will tell you, not just at that chart level 184, which definitely is a chart level, that's strong resistance, but to complement that though, I would say the closing price here, this candle, the closing price of that day, October 10th, 183 and 16 pennies right there. Well, that's exactly where you saw that transaction set off on the time and sales. That's where you would have seen that transaction on the book map, right? 183, 16 cents. Right? I don't make it up. I just follow it. This ended up holding well under this early in the morning and broke out of it as resistance. And guess what resistance actually flipped into perfectly here? Support. So yes, I'm looking at 184 because of the chart resistance. Absolutely. The chart resistance back from October into, September here. Absolutely so. But what I'm using is at least the prior few days. And I'm just trying to see, all right, is there any level that can complement that price. That based on volume or charting, one of the two, that could be a pretty strong level to watch. Looking at the regular graph here, it's just basically been holding well under 184 just on the chart. But looking at the volume bars, though, one of these sticks out unlike the others. You know, this one is much larger in size compared to anything after it. You know, this one's kind of big, but not as big as this. When you look at the volume spikes before that point, like this sticks out. This is like a giant green thumb. So at least from that day, I'll say, all right, where do we see the closing price? What was the close price of that day? Because that's likely where you're going to see that big transaction set off from. So it might be tough to see in the data box that pops up there. If you can kind of squint your eyes and see the word close, and to the right of the word close, 183 and 16 cents. All right, that complements my chart level here. So it's the combination of both, 183, 16 cents, 184 put together. I'm still feeling pretty good about this trade, especially now at this over 184 again here. Let's see it at least hold better from this level now at this point. But resistance should flip into support if we're looking for a better move later on. If we're looking for NVIDIA to try and test 200 coming up here, I'd hope for this move to start working out cleaner. So it's not like I was here on Friday, or even when I first called this out, I didn't take an entry on it. And even beforehand, I wasn't trading NVIDIA around this area. So I just want to point out that there seems to have been some like rummage through here. It shook around like over the last week. Okay. I wasn't really that adamant on NVIDIA right then and there. The fact that it's coming back up to it today, it reinvigorates my interest. And at least the more it's holding around this area, I'm thinking, all right, then eventually we should see something happen. I didn't get stuck in, the shakes from the last week or so there as it was moving up and down. So it's not like I took any losses that I'm upset about. I don't have any emotion tied to this stock shaking around here at the beginning of last week. What I'm looking at is simply, hey, resistance. I'm looking at, hey, if we're expecting another move up on this stock, then I'm looking for resistance to become support. That's just mainly where my focal point is for right now. Now, real quick, before we jump off, I want to get to one or two trades, at least from students here in the chat. One of our new trial members here, non-emotional trader, Todd. For any of our members here, just keep in mind, just put your first name if you can. We're a big community here. We like to know who people are by their name. See Uday as Uday, see Margaret as Margaret, Josh as Josh. You don't need to have a thumbnail, a little picture in your thing. If you want to, that's awesome. We encourage it. But you don't need to if you'd rather like to hide your face, no problem. But from Todd, he was asking about DVLT. So DVLT, also a stock on our morning watch list from earlier. So what happened to this one? Why did this not make the move we wanted it to make in the first hour? And then actually right after 10:30, this thing started to take off. What gives? Why did this make the exact move that it made? So, well, I'll pull up Bookmap here, but I'll mainly just focus on 50-cent levels and whole numbers first. So 2, 250, etc. Let's pull up Bookmap right now, see where the orders were, because again, this was on our morning list. So this didn't make the big giant run that we were hoping for it to make, at least initially. All right, here, we'll start off on this one. This is what it looked like in the pre-market hours. Where do we see the dark orange red line stretching across the page? At what price do we see that dark orange red line stretching across the page right there, folks? $225. So this to me is going to be my resistance leading into the market open. Unfortunately, when the market opened up, it shook down at first. It didn't drop all the way down at $2 even, so it didn't really nip and test support looking for a bounce. And even from there, it just generally held underneath resistance perfectly and came back down. So this didn't really set up for any respectable move for us to work off of. Maybe if this breaks over the opening print here, the big red dot, you could try and jump in when it's breaking above it, and it could flip it into a support, maybe, right? That's a real thought. But if it's not going to make that next leg, then it's just going to waste your time more and more and more and more and more. So at least later on, this ended up finally breaking above resistance here. It smashed above it actually rather quickly at 225. All right, well, that's where at least initially, hey, it broke above resistance very quickly there. Resistance should flip into support at first, and it did. It actually did right there, right? But it needs to keep moving up. It needs to keep making higher highs, go up to the 250 level next. And the more it keeps failing to do that, then A, it could waste time. B, otherwise, it wastes money. So right now, as we stand, I have no interest in this trade until it reclaims back over 225 here. If it comes back above 225, it needs to stay above it, and then it needs to make the move up to 250. But the longer it's doing that, the more opportunity that we're missing, because there's going to be stocks moving without us, the more we're watching the paint dry. So, it's one of those catch-22s where, hey, like maybe it pops later on today. But this thing's so flat and slow right now, there's just trades moving a hell of a lot better. NVIDIA. Beyond Meat trade just before, it actually nipped over that 120. Maybe this could try and hold better above it there. Bookmap down because of AWS, at least for Thinkorswim. It is just got off with support. Yeah, Albert, we're going to jump off at least right now here. I got to jump onto a call with one of our students, but I'll just bring up again. Keep in mind that, Amazon Web Services, when that goes down, like 80% of the internet starts messing up. So, if you had any issues with our classes this morning, our website this morning, we had issues with YouTube today, with Restream, which is where we simulcast, all of our streaming stuff. All that garbage is down today. So unfortunately, it's affecting a lot of different companies. I appreciate you bringing that up, though, Albert. So maybe anyone else that has Thinkorswim, they might be in the same shoes as you. All right, folks. Hey, we're going to come back later on, though, this afternoon, 2:30 p.m. Eastern, just for the afternoon meeting. I'll talk to everybody then. And then keep in mind, we have our next class at 3 o'clock Eastern later on today, just the Phase 2 stock course. So we're going to go back to trading here coming up, and we'll see if there's anything moving at least worth the time. But any questions that you have, folks, just private chat message me from this point forward. It will be easier for me to just work with you on the side from here, answer any follow-up questions, whether it be private chat or you could just shoot me over a quick email. Josh@c2trading.com is the email, folks. I typically jump back on the old email machine at night going into the next morning. Either way, private chat or email will suffice. And with that, we'll be back later on this afternoon, folks. Talk to you then.